क्यों कुबरों दी अड़िए नी जट फोके फैक्टर ना मारे बड़ी बड़ी है टाणी जटा दी नी मैं दिने दिखा दूंगा तारे।
September 11th was a day that devastated the American people, an event that left a permanent scar on their memories.
After 8 years, the scars still remain, but are they still tender to the touch?
California was the state with the most racial discrimination and hate crimes immediately following 9/11. But is the city of Granite Bay as much to blame as the rest of the state?
In this documentary, we will examine whether post-9/11 discrimination is, or ever was, a presence in the lives of the people of Granite Bay.
Since most hate crimes are performed on basis of racial discrimination, there's often a misunderstanding between Muslims and Indian Sikhs.
Have you ever been discriminated against, or have you ever witnessed any discrimination?
Personally, I've never experienced any racial discrimination after the events at 9/11, but I've seen quite a few events happen at airports and such. In some ways, I understand what's going on, but sometimes it just gets out of hand.
Not personally, but I guess every time I go to the airport, well, my dad always gets searched. Even that happens every single time, probably just because he looks Middle Eastern.
I haven't been confronted that much, and people don't usually say it to my face, but I can usually tell when people are looking at me out of the corners of their eyes, and people usually tend to stare, so if that counts as a form of discrimination, then yeah.
Yeah, because like Sikhs, a lot of Sikhs wear turbans, and to other people's eyes, you know, they see people with turbans and they think like terrorists because someone wears a turban.
Racism in such sensitive areas as the airport industry have become cliche now, so it comes as little surprise that issues of racial profiling come up in that regard.
Also, as Ravina suggested, the older generation seems more susceptible to discrimination thanks to their more traditional look.
According to the Sikhs, their experiences prove that some level of prejudice exists within the bubble. But what about the non-ethnic residents of Granite Bay? Have they been witness to discrimination?
Have you ever witnessed any sort of racial discrimination against people of Middle Eastern descent?
Yes. Like, I've seen this woman actually at that Save Mart looked at someone and told her kids to go in the car.
One time we had a guy come in and he was trying to get some kind of discount or something, and we didn't give it to him. I don't know, somehow we got him angry, which led him to blame Ronnie, his Aman's dad, and his family and all that. He said, oh, it's your guys' fault we're in Iraq, it's your guys' fault this and that. It's like, they're not even from Iraq.
As there always will be, there have been some incidents involving racial profiling, yet the general populace from young to old recognize such acts as unjust.
Well, because of the terrorist original heritage, most people then took that heritage and made it into a discrimination saying, oh, now all these people are terrorists, which I found to be very upsetting and wrong.
Blaming one particular race or nationality for things that happen is, I don't feel fair, because problems come from all creeds.
I think that people watched the news and they saw the Taliban or whoever, the certain kind of people, and then they sort of just lumped any person who looks like that into the same group of people.
Not only was the issue solely a racial prejudice, but our research in the following interviews proved that the religious aspect and differences were a majority of the issue as well.
Well, because of the terrorist attack, a lot of it was based off of the religion of the terrorists. A lot of that affected how people view that religion and, you know, gave them a bad view about it.
There are over a dozen different religious groups in the Middle East, yet only one group of, in our view, radical Muslims were guilty of the acts on September 11th.
Most definitely, because what people see in the media and in the news and what's prominent is not the real religion. It's just one aspect of it. Just like there's different sects within Christianity or Judaism or for any religion for that matter, there are different sects within Islam, and the majority of Islam promotes peace.
Most people living in Granite Bay have an add-up understanding of the situation's racial and religious roots, and that the media blew it way out of proportion.
The misinterpretation and confusion between Islam and Sikhism, as well as racial similarities between Indians and other Middle Easterners, both contributed equally to the discrimination.
Interestingly enough, there seems to be some evidence that there was already prejudice against people of Middle Eastern descent, and 9/11 was a catalyst to the exposure of such prejudice.
The tendency for Americans to kind of overreact in a moment of non-understanding when things happen. Pearl Harbor obviously brought about kind of a hatred for Japanese, but the weird part about with America is that usually that hatred, that feeling of differences is always there anyways. And so what happens is when an attack like this occurs, it kind of just inflames something that's already been there. It's just kind of throwing fuel in the fire.
Yeah, it's always been around, but like 9/11 just gave people more of an excuse to start discriminating more.
As the stereotype holds true, the population of Granite Bay is made up of a little over 90% white, all else at 5% or lower.
Dell'orto's statement is a valid reason as to why Granite Bay may not have any racism at all. In this community, the white people vastly outnumber the other ethnicities, making them feel less threatened. Therefore, any pre-existing levels of racial tension were not there at all.
Our goal was to discern if Granite Bay was affected in any way by the racist aftermath of September 11th. So what did we discover?
It is safe to conclude that there is little racial bigotry in Granite Bay, though it is a stretch to say that it is entirely non-existent.
Whether it is due to the obvious numerical minority of brown people here within the city, or because people are more empathetic than the rest of the state, there are little anti-Sikh or anti-Muslim feelings here.
When the next nativist movement comes around, how will it affect Granite Bay? With the situation in North Korea escalating, only time will tell.